Hi, I'm Gareth Green, and in this video we're going to be looking at a couple of phrases of a Bach chorale. And these are often organised into collections. Perhaps the most famous collection is that by Riemenschneider. So this in the Riemenschneider collection is 265 if for some reason you want to look up the whole chorale. And if you're looking at a different collection, well, obviously there's the title, so you can find it that way. Doesn't matter, for the purposes of what we're doing, all we need are these first two phrases. So let's have a look at this chorale and see what's going on, and then we'll get into the nitty-gritty of why we're thinking about the fact that this might be a bit contrapuntal, because the whole point of Bach chorale, surely, is that we've got a hymn tune melody and we're putting chords under the melody. So by nature, it must be homophonic music. It's just going from chord to chord to chord. Yes, but Bach can't resist being a contrapuntalist, and we will see how this works in this chorale very shortly. First of all, let's have a listen to the chorale. This is how these two phrases go. They're always beautiful, aren't they, these Bach chorales? And if you're used to hymns, if you play the organ or sing in a church choir or something, you realise there's always something slightly superior about a Bach chorale. There's more interesting stuff going on than those hymn tunes that do tend just to progress in chords. Well, some interesting things to note about this chorale. So let's just have a little go through things and notice some general things, and then we'll pick up on this contrapuntal thing. Well, we're in the key of D major or B minor, because we've got two sharps in the key signature. When we come to the end of the second phrase, well, you know, we've got A sharps hanging around and it's something that's looking like a perfect cadence in B minor, so great. When you look at the first phrase, well, lots of A naturals around and a cadence in D major. So it looks like a chorale that's starting life in D major and then moving into B minor towards the end of that second phrase. The first chord is therefore quite interesting because Bach begins on a B minor chord. It's almost like he's keeping his options open. Is it going to be in B minor? Is it going to be in D major? I think most people who were harmonizing this would think, well, if the first phrase is in D major, I'll start on a D major chord. It's the most obvious thing to do. Bach does this little touch of let's start on a B minor chord. So you could say, well, that must mean it's chord 1 in B minor. But not really, because there's nothing going on in this first phrase other than that first chord that's really saying B minor to us. So really, this is a chord 6 in D major. So that's an interesting issue, isn't it? That we would start on chord 6. That's a very unusual thing, even for Bach to do, I have to say. Added to which, this first chord is an anacrusis, i.e. it's not beginning on the first beat of the bar, it's beginning on the last beat in this case. But if you've got anything that's short of a bar, well, we've only got 1 beat or 2 beats or something of 4 beats that should be there, it's an anacrusis, it's anacrusic. And the idea is that the last bar should measure up with the first one. So you see we've got 3 beats in the last bar, we've got 1 for the anacrusis. So that's kind of how an anacrusis works. If you have an anacrusis, it may start on a tonic chord. Often it starts on a dominant chord and then you go to a tonic chord. Taken that we've got F sharp in the melody, we can't really start on a dominant chord of D major. So really it's got to start on a tonic chord of D major, you would think. But here's Bach saying, I'm going to use chord 6. So slightly unusual. It then goes on with D major, but he's kind of maybe using that initial B minor chord to flag up the, is it B minor, is it D major thing, you know? That's just Bach intriguing the listener. We go on to a chord 1 in first inversion. So 1B or a 1/6. It's a D, F sharp A with F sharp in the bass, so that's relatively straightforward. Then he goes on to chord 4, which is also relatively straightforward. You'll notice on that chord 4, by the way, that we have the tenor and the bass sharing a note. Are we allowed to do that? I thought this was 4-part harmony. Well, in this chord, we've only really got 3 parts that we can hear. Well, yes, the tenor and the bass are sharing that note. Perfectly possible to do that, as long as you've got good reason for doing it. I can see Bart's good reasoning here. He's kind of wanting the tenor line to go down by step. He could have put a B in the tenor, but that would have doubled our major third and it would have created octaves with the melody, so he didn't really want to do that. So he's a little bit boxed in, so he's decided just to share that note. If you have isolated examples of shared notes, that's usually not a big deal. If you have kind of a shared note in this chord followed by a shared note in the next chord, it starts to sound a little bit thin. So you can get away with it for one chord, but try not to do it for more than one. Then Bart breaks a rule. Naughty Bart. But what's the rule break? It's this. The bass on this beat is on a G. The tenor on the next beat is on an F sharp. So in other words, the bass arrived here. The tenor then goes below the bass line on the next note. So that's crossing of parts. It's something we try to avoid. But he has got those cross parts there between the tenor and the bass. You can kind of see why he's done it. You know, it's keeping the stability of the Ds and the alto, so he doesn't have to go up to an F sharp there and doesn't have to go up to an A in the tenor there. But, you know, he could have done that. Wouldn't have been the end of the world. But it's not really troubling him that he's doing that. Okay, well, let's roll on and see if we can just whiz through our harmonic analysis. Well, now we're going to chord 1, root position. And then as we go on to these notes, these are double passing notes in the tenor and the bass. They're coming between the beats, so they're unaccented passing notes. Double passing notes because 2 parts are moving, using notes that don't belong to the chord, but going by step. The tenor's going F sharp, G, A, and the bass is going D, E, F sharp. So those passing notes are in the middle of 3 notes going by step in the same direction. That's what we need for passing notes or passing tones. And those passing notes facilitate the chord moving up to 1 in first inversion. So 1B or 1/6. That's what's going on here. Now, interesting then at the end of this bar, because you say, my goodness, the harmonic rhythm is very fast here. He's using another chord because this is really a 2/7 in first inversion, a 2/7B or a 2/7/6. You could see it as that, or you could decide that this E in the alto is a passing note. 1, 2, 3, passing note, passing tone, unaccented. You could decide the tenor is using an upper auxiliary note there, an upper neighbor tone. You could decide the bass is using a passing note here. So have we got 3 inessential notes, or have we got a new chord? Well, you know, in a way, we've got both, haven't we? I'll put rings round them because it's showing the possibility of seeing them as inessential notes. But so if you just think, oh, I can just hear them slipping in between the chords, which is kind of how you do hear it in a way, then you can say I've got 3 inessential notes happening at the same time, or 3 non-chord tones happening at the same time. But you could say, nevertheless, they all form 2/7B. Bart loves doing this, kind of like, well, it could be this, it could be that. In fact, in a way, it's both. And that's one of the things that makes Bart much more interesting. Having done that fancy stuff there, he gives us a bog standard cadence. He goes 1C. Notice another shared note between the tenor and the bass again. And then he goes to 5 and then to 1. So 1C, 5, 1. 1 in second inversion, or 1/6/4, 5/1, bog standard cadence. Okay, what's happening in the alto here? Unaccented passing note. So there's the first phrase. 6, 1 in first inversion, 4, 1 in root position, double passing notes, 1 in first inversion, 2/7B, or all those inessential notes, non-chord tones. 1C, passing note or passing tone in the alto, 5/1. And then you're completely convinced, aren't you, that this whole first phrase is solidly in D major. How does he go on? Well, he repeats the same chord. So it's chord 1 in D, then he goes to chord 5 in D, so that's all fine. Then he goes to chord 2, so that's all fine. This is an unaccented passing note. Then he goes to chord 2 in first inversion, a 2B or a 2/6. Here's another unaccented passing note going on there. But then we're coming on to this B minor chord. It's a chord 6. Now, there's a couple of things we need to talk about at this point. First of all, you notice the soprano had this E, but it's a dotted note, which means the E is still sounding when that chord happens, and then it resolves down to D. Now, this E belongs to this chord 2, but it doesn't belong to this chord 6. So what is going on? In fact, this is a suspension that's going on here. So suspension. So a suspension has to be prepared, sounded, resolved. This is the preparation, and it must be a note that belongs to the prevailing chord. Well, yes, that E belongs to that 2, so that's all fine. Then it's got to sound, so it's sounding here. Doesn't look like anything's happening, but that dot means it's moving into beat 4. You can repeat the note or you can sustain it. This time it's sustained. And now the E is dissonant with this chord 6. Then it resolves downwards by step. So that's the resolution of the suspension. It has to resolve by step, nearly always downwards, and it must resolve onto a note that belongs to the chord. Well, great, that D does belong to the chord 6. So P and S should be the same note. Yes, they are. P belongs to the first chord. R belongs to the second chord. Yes, that all fits. S is dissonant. Yes. P must be the same as S. Yes, it's sustained into S. So here we have what we call a 4/3 suspension. So he's just sort of sprucing up that corner. Now, I said there are a couple of things to say about this corner. That's one thing, the suspension. The other thing is to note that this is a pivot chord. In other words, we're moving into a new key. Why do I say that? Because I can see A sharp looming, and that A sharp is telling us that we're going into the key of B minor. So we're looking for a pivot chord, a chord that belongs to the old key and also belongs to the new key. So this chord 6 that we've just been looking at, okay, that's chord 6 in the key of D, but in the key of B minor, it's chord 1. So that is our pivot chord. We try to use a pivot chord to move between one key and another, so we get a smooth modulation. Then we carry on with chord 5. In B minor, we have a passing note there, unaccented passing note or passing tone, that also happens to turn our 5 into a 5/7, a 5/7D to be precise, last inversion. Bart loves to do that. Start with chord 5, add the 7th on the next quaver or 8th note. Loves that stuff. Then we go to 1 in first inversion. Then we have a passing note. And then we're going to end up having a perfect cadence in B minor. It's going to go 5/1. But there's still a bit of detail to sort out. First of all, let us have a look at this tenor part. We started on a B here. The B is still sounding here. Now, the thing about that is that it's not the B that's part of the chord 5, but in order to just position this properly, I really ought to bring that back to there. Okay, so what's happening in this tenor part? Well, this B that we saw on beat 2, that's the preparation of a suspension. It's still sounding here like that one we saw in the soprano, so that's sounding, and then it's resolving. Okay, so does it fit the rules? Is P the same note as S? Yes, it is. It's sustained from P into S. Does S go to R by step? Normally downwards. Yes, it does. Does P belong to the first chord? Yes, it does. Does R belong to the second chord? Yes, it does. So that is a suspension, and it's another 4/3 suspension. So that's what's going on there. But the story's not over, because in the alto, we have an upper auxiliary note or an upper neighbour tone there. Then we come back to a harmony note, and then we have what could be seen as a passing note, but it's also a passing note that adds the seventh to our chord 5. So we've seen how Bach has done that before. So we get quite an interesting thing going on there. So let me just play this last little bit so you can hear how that's working out. So you hear how that suspension happens in the tenor, and then we get that elaboration in the alto as well. So, as always, it's a fascinating analysis just to see what is Bach doing. I mean, if you're trying to improve your analytical skills, this should be helpful. If you're kind of just more interested in how does this music tick and how do these things actually happen, so I can be more aware of them in the music that I play and listen to and music that I write, well, this is all good stuff. So that's what's going on in this chorale. But I also said we wanted to talk about these contrapuntal elements, didn't I? Now, let's just see, well, what do I mean by all of this? Well, you might notice, for example, that at this point in the chorale, the bass is going up a scale. See that bass line going D, E, F sharp, G, A. Well, look at what the alto is doing, a beat behind. An octave higher, exactly the same. So you see, put those two together, bass comes first. So there's a bit of imitation, isn't there? That's quite contrapuntal, isn't it? To have the alto just tracking the bass there. And then notice something in the second phrase, that idea that we've just looked at comes again in the bass. Do you see how this works? We've got this same idea, these rising notes. So there's a kind of, it's revisited at that point, isn't it? And this idea of just climbing that scale. You could say that, you know, we've got things like this in the alto at the end. It's sort of doing the thing upside down, little bit of inversion. We've almost got something similar happening here. You've got 3 notes going down and then it comes up again. So it's sort of slightly modified. So I put those in dots, but I'm just trying to make this point that even though Bach is writing homophonically, he's writing in chords, he's also thinking contrapuntally, polyphonically. He's thinking about imitation. He's thinking about using an idea that becomes imitated between parts. So it's building that into it. He can't resist being a polyphonic composer. And it just adds another element to this whole thing. So I think it's a wonderful chorale. Have a listen to these 2 phrases. Hopefully you can see and hear how all that actually works out in practice. Always a fascinating study looking at these Bach chorales, always lots to learn. But there's an interesting angle on it, that apart from the harmonic analysis and seeing what's going on the pivot chords and all the rest of it, the suspensions, just to realise how he manages to weave in this little bit of contrapuntal thinking. Well, if this is something that's igniting your interest further in Bach chorales, you may be interested to visit our website and have a look at our Bach chorale course. So if you go to www.mmcourses.co.uk, when you click on courses on the homepage. It will take you to a whole list of courses. Just keep scrolling down. You might find other things that interest you, but you will come across a Bach chorale course. And in that, I'm kind of just going into more detail into how to write chorale harmonizations in the style of Bach. So if you're wanting to build up your harmonic skills, if you're needing to write chorales in the style of Bach for an exam or just to enhance your harmonic ability, well, that course will be really useful to you. So have a look and see what you make of that. Anyway, there we have it. A couple of phrases of Bach's Chorale 265. I hope you've enjoyed it. Bye for now.